Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. Thank you for joining us. Several federal agencies are investigating a mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. 67 people died when an Army Black Hawk helicopter and a passenger jet on approach into Reagan National Airport collided last night. Brian Abel brings us more from Arlington and a reaction from the president this afternoon and a warning. Some of the images you're about to see may be upsetting.
American Airlines says Flight 5342 from Wichita, operated by PSA, was on approach to land at Reagan National Airport when it and an Army Black Hawk helicopter from the 12th Aviation Battalion, similar to this one, collided in flight.
It was a fairly experienced crew, and it was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
There was not a breakdown in communication between the military helicopter and American airline flight. There was communication between the aircraft and the tower.
Among the PSA jet's passengers, several athletes, coaches, and family members returning from a development camp with U.S. figure skating. In a statement, the governing body said it is devastated by this unspeakable tragedy. At the White House, President Donald Trump addressing the tragedy.
As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken.
But he also pointed fingers.
I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. The FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so.
When asked for evidence why DEI could be a factor.
Because I have common sense, okay?
This morning, the president appointed a former senior aviation official as the FAA's acting administrator. That role, among others at the agency, were left empty following resignations ahead of Trump taking office. In Arlington, Brian Abel, KPBS News.
The D.C. crash shares similarities with the 1978 Pacific Southwest Airlines flight crash in North Park that killed 144 people. Our media partner, KGTV, spoke to Jim Kidrick. He's the president and CEO of the San Diego Air and Space Museum. He says the tragedy played a pivotal role in developing new technology that helps commercial airline pilots today.
The traffic alert and collision avoidance system depends on both aircraft having their transponders on, or their IFF. And it will send signals. In other words, your airplane would send a signal to mine would send a signal to yours, and it indicates basically distance, okay, mostly in altitude or in horizontal displacement. It's a good system. It improves our safety. The military aircraft in this particular case that we're talking about, the Black Hawk, did not have TCAS on board.
Kidrick says traffic avoidance systems are known to not operate at low altitudes, and that may have been a factor in the D.C. crash.
Well, happy Thursday, everyone. As we head into the weekend, I am tracking some rain that will continue, but it's going to stay well north of our area. Overall, we're going to see lots of sunshine here as we head throughout your Saturday and Sunday. We will see some cool starts, but some mild afternoons here setting up for us. How mild is it going to be? I'll detail that updated forecast coming up.
The annual homelessness census took place early this morning all around San Diego County. KPBS reporter Melissa May followed a group of volunteers through downtown San Diego, and she spoke with some unsheltered people.
At 4 a.m., a group of volunteers meets in a downtown church to prepare for this year's point-in-time count.
We're going to be in and around Petco Park. This is so important because we need to have a snapshot. We need to understand what is going on within our communities, the populations for which we are serving, and the needs that they have. And the only way to do that is to collectively do that in one point in time.
Ketra Carter is the program manager for homelessness strategies and solutions with the city of San Diego. She says it's not just about counting the homeless. It's about engaging with them to better understand why they're on the streets and their needs to get into housing.
I only get SSI, so I can't afford to get in it anywhere anymore because it's like double the rent. That it costs too much to get inside with just SSI.
Burgundy Collinsworth says she's been homeless for the last year.
When I'm trying to figure out food, place to go, safety, and all this other stuff, I can't keep checking into perk. When I lose my phone, someone steals my phone, I ain't got it. Or I've got mental health or drug issues, I can't keep doing it. So I give up.
Michael Woozy has been on the streets for 2 years. He says severe arthritis in his knees led him to start self-medicating.
I don't use alcohol or anything, but I use this stuff for pain. And it just made it difficult. And I ended up out here, and it's been a long and lonely road. I'm 63 years old, so I get my pension, but I make too much to qualify for the benefits, but I don't make enough to actually pay for an apartment on my own. I'm like right on there. They put a money threshold on who they give benefits to.
The point-in-time count helps determine future federal homelessness funding to help people like Woolsey and Collinsworth.
Information that is utilized to identify the resources that are needed to help someone end their episode of homelessness, but also the level and the volume of funding that we need in order to do so. This information is gathered and shared with our elected officials to go to Washington and help fight the good fight and advocate for the funding that we need to end homelessness here in San Diego.
The city of San Diego says it received about $17 million in federal grants for homelessness this fiscal year. It's unclear how a possible freeze by the Trump administration could impact future federal homelessness funding. A spokesperson for the city of San Diego declined to comment on hypothetical cuts. Melissa May, KPBS News.
The number of people experiencing homelessness in the North County has grown, and service providers are trying to keep up with the demand for services. The point-in-time count data that is collected is pivotal for future funding. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne joined volunteers as they hit the streets before the sun was up.
It's 4 in the morning, and the nutrition center at Interfaith Community Services in Escondido is filled with volunteers. They are getting ready to head into the streets and connect with as many people experiencing homelessness as possible.
It's important to do this count because it enables us to see how many people are experiencing homelessness on this day and to be able to provide more services and get more help for these people.
Melina Bautista is one of those volunteers. But getting an accurate count is easier said than done.
We have been trying to see if there's some individuals living in their cars, which there has been. Some of the people did not want to be interviewed, but we were able to count them because they were sleeping at this time. But several individuals who were sleeping on the streets, we were able to interview them and count them as well.
Michelle Hernandez is experiencing homelessness, but wasn't surveyed in today's count. She was on the bus from San Diego to Escondido trying to get a hot meal, but got there too late.
It's about an hour and a half respectively, one way. And so I've learned that there's breakfast here, hot meals, breakfast for Monday through Friday.
She says it's exhausting trying to get help and questions where funding is really going.
Spend billions for homeless, okay? Like billions. And over time, a lot of money. And you often wonder where those resources are going. Because it seems like personally me, I would love to see an audit of where those funds go.
An audit conducted last year showed California spent almost $24 billion on homelessness and housing over the last 5 years, but failed to track its progress. Since then, Governor Gavin Newsom has called for an increase in accountability from service providers. Interfaith Community Services CEO Greg Angel says helping people out of homelessness comes at a cost.
Health services through licensed behavioral health clinicians, those robust wraparound services are really critical to helping people overcome so many challenges that they experience when they're homeless, but they do come at a cost.
And the reality is?
Well, shelter is very expensive.
While there is a need to create more shelter space, Angel says that just solves a temporary problem.
We also need to work on creating affordable housing for people to move out of shelters into. That's the ultimate solution to homelessness, is housing.
The results of the point-in-time count will come out later this year. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
As news circulates of immigration and customs enforcement raids across the country, local schools say they're on edge. Our media partner, KGTV, followed up with Fernando Hernandez. He's the principal of Perkins Elementary School in Barrio Logan. ICE hasn't been to the school yet, but if officers do show up, Hernandez says they aren't allowed to interview students without parents' permission.
Even if they are undocumented. I mean, children are protected. We're going to keep doing the best we can. We're still going to maintain a safe environment and reassure all of our families that their children are safe in the school.
Hernandez says many of the families who attend the school either have protected status or are in the process of getting protected status. In a turnabout that brought relief to UC San Diego science researchers, the White House lifted a freeze on federal funding. But KPBS's Amita Sharma says the reversal left them on edge and with nagging questions.
It's been a stressful and chaotic 48 hours for researchers at UC San Diego. They interpreted the Trump administration's pause on federal grants Monday as a shock and awe effort meant to warn them that the direction of their work could be changed or stopped altogether. And that's why UC San Diego infectious disease doctor Davy Smith says he and his colleagues are greeting the reversal to that spending freeze cautiously and critically.
It just feels very chaotic. And whenever I feel like people are making chaotic decisions, it's oftentimes not the decision itself, but it's something else that's going on. Is it just a show of power that I can do this? Is it a show of putting you on notice? Is it a distraction from something else? I don't really know. But at the moment, we're left in this huge amounts of uncertainty that makes everybody anxious. And maybe that's the point.
UC San Diego received about $1 billion in federal funding last year, and other local research institutes also draw in considerable federal dollars. Smith says the university is one of the top institutions in the country, making strides in cancer treatments, vaccines, AI, and health technology. UC San Diego public health scientist Rebecca Fielding Miller says this week's federal funding saga has some of her colleagues and students rethinking their careers.
And I think that sort of seeing this ongoing push and pull is really concerning for folks who are early in their career, and it's worrying about if we can keep our staff employed.
She believes federal funding of research will come up again. Next time, she hopes there's a, quote, bipartisan constitutional process with input from scientists. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
Public Matters is a partnership with KPBS, iNews Source, and Voice of San Diego. You can see more of our stories at kpbs.org/Public Matters. The creation of energy from nuclear fusion has been a goal in the developed world for decades, and technology advances at companies like General Atomics in San Diego are bringing us closer to it. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us about this quest to put the sun in a bottle, providing what would be unlimited power.
In August last year, the control room at General Atomics had something to celebrate. They generated their plasma shot number 200,000. That's an experimental fusion of hydrogen atoms you smash together to generate the heat you need to produce energy. David Pace is deputy director of the fusion facility run by General Atomics.
With fusion, what we're going to do, we're going to take two particles, and if you smash them together hard enough, they release net energy. And that's what we do. We want to smash together a lot of particles and make a lot of energy.
Nuclear fusion is what happens on the sun. The process leaves behind helium and energy, and none of that long-lasting nuclear waste that has bedeviled its scientific cousin, the nuclear fission power plant. Richard Buttery is the director of General Atomics' D3D fusion reactor, which is funded by the Department of Energy. He said the promise of exploiting fusion on Earth is a virtually limitless supply of energy.
Because the fuel we have for fusion is abundant around the world. The deuterium, that's one type of hydrogen that we use. You just extract that from seawater. The other fuel that we want to use, lithium, is something you can pull out the ground. It's common. It's in your cell phone batteries, and the amounts you need to do a lot of energy is very small.
The quest for fusion energy has been a long haul. Scientists have been pursuing it since the Second World War, and some of the testing infrastructure is pretty old school. At General Atomics, the fusion reactor is called a tokamak, a technology that's been around since the 1960s. Originally developed by the Russians, the so-called tokamak is a donut-shaped oven that conducts the intense heat needed for fusion. Powerful magnets are used to control the energy. But with all the progress that's been seen, we still don't have the technology to contain and release fusion energy, so it can boil water, run a turbine, and generate power. Pace says the challenge now is turning the science into a fusion power plant.
We have a piece of science that we understand really, really well, but now we have to fold that into a physical device that takes it to the next step, that gets you closer to producing electricity. And it's really this integration and this full system approach that is just an incredibly challenging problem.
He says the industry still needs research and development. The development of materials like the steel that go inside the reactor that doesn't unexpectedly erode or emit particles important to fusion. A possible answer to this challenging problem is taking shape in France, an international project called ITER, which is Latin for the way. It is a tokamak-powered facility that will be the closest thing the world has seen to a fusion power plant. Its goal is to get fusion to continue in the reactor under its own heat and power, not relying on the kind of imported heat needed for a brief plasma shot. Buttery says ITER's goal is to produce 10 times the energy it gets from an outside heating source. This year, General Atomics will ship to ITER a magnet to contain its super hot ball of gas. And Buttery says this is going to be the world's biggest magnet.
Just to give you one stat here, this is a magnet that is so powerful that it could lift an aircraft carrier out of the water.
Scientific work on fusion energy has gone on for so long you have to forgive people for casting doubt when they hear somebody say, "We're almost there." Innovation and Public Policy Professor David Victor co-directs UC San Diego's Energy Decarbonization Initiative. He says the old joke about fusion is it's the great energy source of the future, and it always will be. But he does believe that recent progress toward the goal is no joke.
There are a lot of improvements in technologies that make several different strategies for fusion energy at least seem a lot more plausible than they did even 5 or 10 years ago. New kinds of lasers, and in particular, new kinds of magnets, really, really powerful magnets that can confine a fusion plasma.
But he says every new energy source has uncertainties, and as we consider fusion, don't forget the potential of wind and solar. Even nuclear fission may have a future if the industry can build small modular units. Meanwhile, Buttery says private sector investment in fusion in the U.S. has increased hugely, from venture capitalists to philanthropic groups.
At the government level, the United States is investing strongly in fusion, and so are our competitors. China is actually outspending the United States by a factor of 2 in its government funding.
Buttery says with increased investment, people in the fusion field believe we will have fusion power plants sometime in the 2030s. If that does happen, the question of whether you can draw power from one of them may depend on where you live. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
You can learn about history by looking at what people tossed out in the trash years ago. Ken Kramer found a man who's made a study of it. He shows us in this story about San Diego.
In the basement archives of the County Administration Center on Pacific Highway, surrounded by relics of San Diego County's past, is where photographer Suzanne Bartol of the County News Center and I found Jay Johnson at work. Right now, Jay is going through boxes of little things that people threw away a long time ago, all of them dug up from just one place and meticulously cataloged.
There's over 1,400 entries here. Hammer, brick, doll, shoe, boot, doorknob, plate, pot, shell, vase.
And where do they all come from? At the corner of Cedar and Kettner Streets is this 10-level parking structure. On weekdays, county employees park here. On weekends and at nights, it's a Little Italy landmark in colored lights. But more than a century before it was built, San Diegans who lived in the neighborhood dumped their trash here.
There was no garbage man pickup service until after 1910, so everyone kind of had to get rid of their own waste.
And these things were what they threw out on that very spot.
It's an old spoon, definitely.
Most of them were recovered from what was probably an outhouse pit.
A San Diego logo on an old milk bottle.
If you know what to look for, they can reveal clues about who lived here. Old meat bones, for example.
But they could tell a lot about the, working class people, or what class of people they were by the types of cuts of meat.
And then there are those things that create more questions than answers.
Let's take it out. Look, item ball, 30 grams. So I don't think it's a nut. It's not hollow. I think I'm going to take a guess, a toy of some sort.
By comparing what was used and thrown away with census records and other data, a picture begins to emerge of an incredibly diverse community in that part of Little Italy.
More so than today. There was all sorts of races, of colors, and creeds of people.
As construction crews began to excavate for the new parking garage, archaeologists were on site to carefully monitor, remove, and catalog anything that turned up. The result was more than 10 boxes of everything from bottle caps to doorknobs. But it was the bottles themselves that turned out fascinating, so much so that Jay created an exhibit of them. They're on permanent display at the parking garage on the street level by the elevators. When you see it, think of all the things there wasn't room for, all the things that in the 1890s and the turn of the century, people just threw away, never imagining they'd end up in boxes at the county building, little things that are so full of history about San Diego.
Ken Kramer has a half hour of stories every week about San Diego. You can see them Thursday nights right here on KPBS at 8 o'clock.
As we head into tonight, I will be tracking some low clouds, especially near the coast. We will see overnight lows, a mix of 40s and 50s. So it is going to be a chilly start here for your early Friday morning, but overall we're going to see some mild conditions. Now we will see some 30s up to the north, down to 37 tonight for Oceanside and Camp Pendleton. So yes, we will see some chilly starts here for tonight. Overnight lows will be a mix of 30s, 40s. We'll even see some 50s here for some inland areas. Future track radar is showing that as we head throughout tomorrow, 6 a.m. we'll see rainfall, but once again, that rain's going to stay primarily up to the north. Now, these showers will try their best to back build as we head throughout the day and develop more to the south. Now, we will see some really impressive snowfall totals across the mountains, but overall, this rainfall is going to stay well north of Los Angeles, so none of that rainfall is going to trickle down, especially down to the San Diego metro. So for your Friday afternoon, dry conditions continue here across the Four Corners. All that rainfall, all that snow will stay well north here as we head throughout Friday. Temperature-wise here, we'll see lots of sunshine. Highs will be a mix of 60s primarily. We'll see 40s in the higher elevations, possibly even some 70s in the desert, but overall lots of sunshine. And then looking forward to Saturday, once again dry here across Southern California. Still watching some of that rainfall, heavy rainfall, and some of that snowfall developing well up to the north. So across the coast here for your 5-day outlook, we'll see lots of sunshine here as we head into the weekend. No real good chance of organized rainfall here setting up for us. Overnight lows will be in the 40s, but then we'll rebound into the 50s by about midweek. Afternoon highs will be in the low to mid 60s. We'll see the warmest weather there on Sunday afternoon. As you look at the inland forecast, lows tonight in the 30s, a chilly start for your Friday, but then after that, look at these highs are going to go from the 60s on Friday to the 70s starting on Saturday before a little bit of a cool down by about midweek. And then for your mountain forecast, it'll be lots of sunshine, so pretty nice here for us. And then for the desert, we'll see highs back in the 80s by Sunday.
Thousands are donating to help pick up the pieces after devastating loss from historic wildfires earlier this month. And tonight, a long list of top performers are coming together for a benefit concert to help. Maribel Gonzalez is in Inglewood, where the fundraiser is ready to kick off.
But don't lose me.
I promise I
I
won't.
won't lose you, don't worry.
As the Ian fire exploded in Altadena on January 8th, residents, including this 100-year-old woman, were guided out of their homes as thick smoke from the fire moved in.
Oh my gosh.
The historic wildfires, fueled by hurricane-like winds, ravaged through entire neighborhoods in Los Angeles County.
This was a passport. So now I don't even have a passport.
Considered among the most destructive and deadliest in the state's history, the Eaton and Palisades fires claimed at least 29 lives and collectively destroyed more than 16,000 structures. In this time of need, hundreds coming together to help those affected.
We'll be here until everything runs out or until the community doesn't need it anymore.
And now, a benefit concert to help those who lost everything. Or many who lost their homes, churches, and businesses during this disaster. Now another trial ahead of them.
A lot of people are in that boat right now where maybe the fires have gone away, but there's just so much that comes after.
What took days to burn will likely take years to rebuild.
Once debris is cleared, the rebuilding process begins, and the planning and design can start now.
I'm Maribel Gonzalez, reporting.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. President Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on some of America's biggest trading partners as early as this weekend. NPR's Morning Edition reports on how some businesses are trying to prepare. And KPBS Roundtable is discussing the Trump administration's increased immigration enforcement and its impact on San Diego County communities. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.